Code Veronica. It felt like there was something really big happening.
Just for a little while. So, I guess I've done. So latest, there's a tiny. What's on everyone? Jerry from ordering more than anything, the movie just looks bad. I think trotting out a geriatric Arnold before time is enough to get some boomers out to maybe check out the film. But the Terminator franchise in and of itself has basically been backsliding for years after essentially setting the gold standard in CGI from what I remember in the early 90s with Terminator 1 and 2, or particularly Terminator 2. The rest of the Terminator movies have been a hodgepodge of near misses and outright disasters up until this point, but early projections are now coming in for Terminator Dark Soft, even while evidently no age the same the same type of wants that CGI in a modern-day Ghostbusters movie somehow managed to look significantly worse than the originals. They tried to push out this men don't want to see our movie, so women should totally buy 2 tickets. Now, this apparently worked to some degree with
a bit more care is being put into it for the fans. And we have a release date now. That's the exciting part, because originally early 2020, it is very early 2020. Like it is close to 2019. It's only about 2 weeks into 2020. That's right. There's going to be a release date is planned January 16th, but then immediately after that, we did see a release date that's coming to the US. This was from Bandai US, where they say January earlier this year. And then it's coming out right at the beginning of this year coming up. I feel like it's earlier this year. And then it's coming out right at the beginning of this year coming up. I feel like it's early 2020 just because there wasn't much room for it in 2019. And they wanted to give it a pretty good chance where there aren't as many games around. But, I mean, the are going to buy this game. I'm still interested in playing or characters, all kinds of stories all over the place. Really cool Dragon Ball fans like that. Let's talk about that 7 remake. This game is looking I am really, really excited for this game. Look, when I was growing up, of course, the PS1, the N64 were right there, right? Like the primary focuses of my time in like middle school and everything, early middle school, and then going into the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era. But But if there's a game that I specifically remember, it's Final Fantasy VII. It was massively talked about in school and everything because it was this crazy 3D RPG, something we had really never seen before to that scale. And now we're getting a beloved RPG remade, and man, the details in this game look crazy. Remember Advent Children? We are getting so close to that, the visuals of that in a video game on the PS4. Like, we're that close. And if this does end up spilling over into the PS5, which I assume it will, like, we'll probably get this ported to the PS5, and then I assume the project will continue on there, or they'll just continue developing for the PS4, and it'll just be backwards compatible or ported with extra, visual features and everything. But the trailer they showed looks amazing. It was more in depth. They showed different parts of. I'm glad they're spending their time really fleshing out parts of the story rather than trying to rush through it and get take Final Fantasy VII and basically just tell the entire story all over again. I like that we're getting little looks in parts of the game that we didn't before, and it seems like they're going to spend quite a bit of time on some of the cutscenes and everything as they showed parts of the only.
Few eggs and turned on your TV to some mid.
After filling Rick in on the situation, we take our first step inside the facility. Like Rick said earlier, this place is super abandoned, but knowing there are dinosaurs on the loose, we have to keep our guard up. Climbing up into a ventilation shaft and exploring further, we find the control room where Rick is waiting. Rick is doubtful about all of this dinosaur talk. I guess he didn't see any dinos on the way in. I think he's just happy that Gail is missing. Rick lets Regina know that this place's security system is complicated. He won't be able to power up all of the areas yet from this one station. After this, Regina heads out. What follows is familiar survival horror gameplay, finding items, dodging past enemies, and solving puzzles. And that's actually where I'm going to cut the story recap, because Dino Crisis is a very short game, and I don't want to get too spoilery with this video. This game's story is simple but effective. Dino Crisis is about 6 to 8 hours a night horror games. Location, finding a robust cyber story, basically in and out lives from the majority of the game. Very definitely ghost, and there is actually very to figure out why the text is dead. The fun is really fun. The problem I have with the story is that while this game is really fun, there
organizations claiming that a Mexican cartoon frog is a symbol of hate. I think they lost the plot a little bit, huh? Because here's the thing, I'm pretty sure that, so yeah, I generally do not agree with what the ADL is. If you're going to claim that you're a civic rights organization, then why aren't you fighting for human rights? How can you claim that you're fighting for human rights when free speech is something that the United Nations signed on their charter as being a human right? And I know that free speech isn't absolute, right? Like blackmailing, incitement to violence, and all these things, yeah, they don't constitute free speech. But making a joke, making a meme with a frog as a cartoon is definitely 100% free speech. And the fact that the ADL is now, deciding to police jokes is very concerning. So, I personally do not agree with the way this organization is going. And I think this is why a lot of the fans from PewDiePie also do not appreciate the fact that he has decided to donate money to an organization that used to be against him, that tried to ruin him in the past, and is also, like, imagine this, you're just a random guy on the internet, you're using the Pepe the Frog meme, you're not a racist, but now people are claiming you are because the ADL says so. That is collateral damage. So I get like a lot of people are now upset, and I guess the racists maybe got what they wanted, because that's literally it. Like a racist isn't upset if he is called a racist. He'll admit it. But if he can manage to get other people caught in the crossfires, then, more people are going to be radicalized. Now, I understand the concern of some people that will say, well, V, stop bringing our postmodernist, deconstruction, critical theory bullshit into this. Like, if that's the case, when can you say that a symbol belongs to a specific group? Because obviously, like, a symbol can be used by multiple people. And I think it's like when a symbol is used almost exclusively by a group, that's when it becomes part of the group. For example, the hammer and sickle. People who aren't communists rarely will use the symbol unless they're a historian or something, right? The American flag. People who aren't American aren't likely to fly the American flag. The swastika. People who aren't Nazis aren't, those are symbols that legitimately are assessed to a specific organization. And you're not going to do collateral damage if you're going to say, yeah, people who fly the American flag are patriots, for example. It might happen that a person who isn't a patriot might fly the American flag, but that is very rare. Meanwhile, if you look at Pepe the Frog, I mean, that 3 years ago, almost all Trump supporters were doing it on the internet, not because they were racist, but because it upset people, and it was funny to upset someone by using a Mexican frog. It's a cartoon. A cartoon Mexican frog is not even real, it's fictional. And people were getting upset. So yeah, that's why they did it. It wasn't because they're racist. But anyway, right, so let's look at PewDiePie explaining why he donated money. So he tweeted out that misrepresenting headlines of him has led him down a path of twists with the mainstream media for years now. Previously, it hasn't bothered him so much. I know who I am. But after the Christchurch travesty a few months ago, his own clash with the mainstream media was manipulated as a tool for destruction. I'm not okay with this situation any longer, and I felt responsibility to make changes. Making that donation to the ADL doesn't make sense to everyone, especially since they've outright spoken against me. I wanted to show publicly that I can move past it and move on. I think it's important this isn't my fight anymore. So this is what I don't get. Like, I understand the ADL, the American Defense League, is an organization that is designed to protect Jewish people against anti-Semitism. So is PewDiePie saying that terrorist attack in mosque happens, Jews are most affected? Like, why did he donate money to Linda Sarsour or something? Huh? I mean, at least he didn't donate money to the Northern Filthy Rich Outlaw Center. See what I did there. Okay, so I get it, it's fucked up. Like, I genuinely can't imagine how it is to wake up in the morning and know that a mass murderer, a terrorist, committed crimes and uttered your name. And maybe PewDiePie actually feels guilty about it. I generally don't know. Like, he seems like a good guy. He donates money to...
Quite honestly, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Hi, my name is Sydney. Welcome back to my channel. You know what we haven't done in a little while? Laughed at crazy leftists, which is, believe it or not, one of my favorite things to do. We have a long history of that here. So today I thought we could take a break from all the seriousness in the world, because it's depressing, to laugh at some dumb things that I found on the internet recently. Like how we should be eating other dead human beings in order to fight climate change. That's not a joke. Or how someone created a chair for bisexual people because they can't sit straight. Also not a joke. Or how the city of Perth in Australia has decided to make Christmas less Christian. Because that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually kidding. It makes no sense at all. Even Monopoly made a version of the game that is designed to help women get further ahead than men by giving them more money. In the game, of course. They don't try to do that in real life. But rest assured, none of this was quite as dumb as a video that Now This News released recently. In this video, they claim that referring to women as guys, in the sense of using the colloquial term to say like, hey guys, or whatever, is apparently sexist and I guess offensive to women. I mean, because really, what's not offensive to these people these days? Hey guys seems innocuous, but here's why you might want to try a different greeting. This should be good.
Guys is a simple term. It could mean boys, or if you're modern, hip, it means people. At first glance, guys seems inviting, friendly, maybe warm, even comedic at times. But it, like many male default terms, should not be normalized as an all-encompassing phrase, innocent as it may seem. While we may understand the word means no real harm, with a deeper look, you'll understand that we've been ignoring the folks by only explicitly addressing the male identifying individuals present.
Okay, yeah. So if you missed it, the implication here is that it hurts women when you refer to them as guys, because it excludes them. It only includes men, even though the term is literally defined in the dictionary to mean person, used in plural to refer to members of a group regardless of sex. Have a glass of water there, Karen. It's gonna be all right.
For decades, we have set a standard of only addressing the men in the room. Of course, we claim it's colloquial, but with our elevated knowledge and inclusive perspective, it just seems lazy, inconsiderate, and a small part of what reinforces the gender hierarchy today.
I wonder if that's the same gender hierarchy that gives women shorter prison sentences.
How is one to feel empowered to speak or assert themselves when upon greeting, they're misgendered or even ignored in language? Can we be surprised that for decades, women often felt uncomfortable asserting their voice when we didn't even take the time to properly acknowledge them?
Obviously, I'm a female, at least I'm pretty sure. And I plainly don't understand the mentality of women who are so fragile that they feel that you have to acknowledge their gender at every given opportunity, like during every interaction that you have with them. Ever. Karen, honey, of all the things I'm interested in, your lady bits are not one of them. So just breaking down the logic here for a hot second, because guys has historically referred to men, now it can't be applied to women. But equally, by every person ever who has been referred to as a guy could be offended because historically, the word also meant someone who was grotesque in appearance. That's not a joke. But genuinely, it makes absolutely no sense to act like the current meaning of the word doesn't count simply because it has historical origins meaning something different. Stop that.
These linguistic tendencies were developed and reinforced in eras where women were barely meant to be seen and certainly not heard.
Now, Karen, and I don't mean to burst your bubble or anything, but I looked into this a little. And apparently, by the early 1930s, Americans were only just beginning to use guys to refer to both men and women. When you then look at the frequency of the word's use in television and media, you find that it really didn't become popularized until the 1970s and onward. Really, if you think about it logically, which I know is not a feminist strong suit, we really started to use the term to refer to everyone, including women, well into women's suffrage. I mean, if you're looking on the bright side of life, like I like to do, you could even say that the reason the word became so popular is because women were being included in, like, societal discussions or whatever. Point is, women were being heard. In fact, we still hear you. My God, do we hear you?
But when you stop valuing the personhood and visibility of individuals, you make it easier to dehumanize them on a macro scale, minimizing his, her, its, their right to respect and equality. I'm not offended, per se, if someone lumps me in with the guys. I'm sure there's really no malintent. In fact, if you and your friends want to freely address each other, by all means. I just want you to know that you're one small step away from making a more conscious effort to dismantle the patriarchy.
Who would have thought that not saying guys is actually fighting the patriarchy?
Don't believe me? Try walking into a room full of cisgender heterosexual men and triumphantly announce, "Hey gals, okay girls, thanks sis." I'm sure within 10 minutes, if not seconds, at least one person will correct you. We should all be as protective of our gender identities as a cisgender heterosexual man.
Oh my God, it's like they're not even trying. Nobody refers to women and men collectively by any of those terms. Those terms are specifically reserved for women, or by 2019 standards, humanoids with XX chromosomes. It would basically be the same thing as referring to everyone as boys or lads or dudes. Actually, come to think of it, dudes is becoming pretty gender neutral now. I guess avoiding using that word will also help you fight the patriarchy. But yeah,
Powerful.
my goodness, that was...
Going to go to 1 minute 12.
Creepy people, then to a generic term for men, and now, some would say, a gender-neutral phrase.
Not some would say, a gender-neutral phrase. People such as yourselves are the only people who seem to be offended by this word. This is not an issue. This is a non-problem.
For decades, we have set a standard of only addressing the men in the room.
Again, this is the second time that you said that. That is not the case, and I have explained why.
How is one to feel empowered to speak or assert themselves when upon greeting, they're misgendered or even ignored?
They're not being ignored in the language, and they're not being misgendered because in this particular context, look, I don't know how many times I have to keep explaining it, but now she's going to show some archival footage from what looks like the 50s or something.
Language. Can we be surprised that for decades, women often felt uncomfortable asserting their voice when we didn't even take the time to properly acknowledge them?
This is just complete historical revisionist bullshit. My grandmothers and my mother very much asserted themselves in the household. This is complete garbage. Gender roles were traditional in the past. That's what made them work, I would argue. Nowadays, they've been broken down. But the past, and I don't want to just look back here with steamed up nostalgic glasses or something, but let's be honest, it's far better than the clown world we've inherited, unfortunately.
Tendencies were developed and reinforced in eras where women were barely meant to be seen and certainly not heard.
What the actual hell? Like, remember that expression? Women, children should be seen and not heard. Women were not children. No. Yeah. Let's just carry on.
Please note, you're not a bad feminist if you're comfortable with using the phrase, guys. There are larger issues that we, the feminists, need to combat.
There are larger issues that you, the feminists, could combat on behalf of some women in parts of the world where they have less rights than women do in the West. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about innocuous things like the word guys.
Reproductive rights, rape culture, violence against women.
Yes, there's violence against women. It's called a crime, and the law deals with crimes. And also, as a man, you're more likely to be a victim of violent crime. So, there you go.
LGBTQ rights.
I thought they had the rights they wanted.
And the general reprogramming of most people's minds when it comes to the valuation of women in society. But when you stop valuing the personhood and visibility of individuals, you make it easier to dehumanize them on a macro scale.
Stop. I can't stop. Just enough. You're talking horse shit. It's just meaningless words now. Dehumanize and all this kind of stuff and personhood and visibility and value. Stop. It's just a word. It's just guys. All right. It has no other meaning, and you are deliberately trying to create an issue out of an absolute nothing. And it's just painful.
Minimizing his, her, its, their right to respect and equality.
It's just his and her. And I would argue that this nonsense about anyone who refers to themselves as it, that's pretty dehumanizing, isn't it? Who would do such a thing?
I'm not offended, per se, if someone wants to be in with the guys. I'm sure there's really no malintent.
There isn't, so that's the most important thing. End of the video. No, there's still a minute, 50-something seconds.
In fact, I want you to know that you're one small step away from making the effort to dismantle the patriarchy.
Brilliant. Yes. She dropped the P word, patriarchy. It's not like completely dismantled at this point. Come on, if you not dismantled it already, I'm pretty certain it was dismantled. I was up for a walk earlier on. I walked past it, actually. I saw the patriarchy, and it was up on bricks. And some of the windows were smashed, and I'm fairly certain someone had taken a key all along the side of the passenger door. Oh, no. Maybe that was just a car I saw. I don't know why I always get those two mixed up. Maybe because the patriarchy drives me crazy. I let myself out.
Don't believe me? Try walking into a room full of cisgender heterosexual men and triumphantly announce, "Hey gals, okay girls, thanks sis." I'm sure within 10 minutes, if not seconds, at least one person will correct you. We should all be as protective of our gender identities as a cisgender heterosexual man.
You never get your hands on me, gender identities, Lucky Charms. Gender identities, like Pokemon. You gotta catch them all.
Substitute one "hey guys" with a simple "good morning, everyone." Hi, y'all, folks, everybody, scholars.
Scholars?
Team if you're at work, campers if you're in the forest, bayhive because it's always appropriate.
I don't know what that is.
You can also just find ways to insert people's names and address everyone present.
Next week's episode of Now This, how to boil an egg. Let me explain to you how to do a high five, but in a non-offensive way. Who would find this content useful? Who takes this kind of stuff seriously?
And when in doubt, say nothing at all. Hey.
That expression, see? I did it. How are people not as smart as me? How can people not see how easy that is? See? I did it. And the world didn't apart. Hey guys, it's Dave. I'm just gonna keep doing it more now.
Works.
Works. It works. Told ya.
I challenge you to take an extra 0.5 seconds to think about what comes out of your mouth before you say it.
God, this is sanctimonious. Sorry, guys. I can't do that. Guys?
Somewhere along the way, hey, you may slip a guy out or two.
That was scripted very badly. Just read that again. Somewhere along the line, hey, you may slip a guy out or two.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Wednesday Checkup.
Things like that would brighten my day.
The second ever person in the world has been cured of HIV. If this story is true,
this is silly or too PC.
It's incredibly PC, yeah. And it should be called out whenever it happens. Because no, under absolutely no circumstances am I changing my language to accommodate you.
But there are always larger societal
Hello
implications.
and welcome to Insider's Health
absolutely no
TV.
societal
I'm Kimberly
implication.
Wallison with the freshest happenings world of medicine without the quack.
The way we use it and weaponize it. Face it, the things we do and say matter.
No, I don't agree with that frame either. Some of the things we do and say matter. Most things that people say and do are not profound and not all that important. Some ideas are very important and profound and meaningful and can change the course of history, but no, most of the things we say and do are not all that important from day to day. From day to day. Most people are just living their lives and they're just going about their day and they're meeting friends and family and they're saying things like guys and whatever, and that's that. And this kind of horse shit is trying to create issues where they don't exist. And sorry, I reject it completely. No, the things we do and say sometimes can be very important. Most of the time, no. And the word guys is not important. And it's not an issue.
So if you do nothing else, repeat after me. I am powerful.
I am powerful. What's that got to do with anything? Seems a bit strange ending. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out if this really has a genuine audience. Like, is this aimed at Gen Zers? I hope they don't take it seriously. Anyway, I'll leave it there, guys. And when I said guys, not just referring to my male audience, but also my female audience, which is about, 9% of my total subscriber base. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. And guys, make sure you subscribe. And guys, hit that like button. Guys, please comment below. And guys, also follow me over on Minds and Gab and BitChute. Because you never know, guys. You just never know. Anyway, again, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, guys. And guys, I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.
Today on Re-Res, we're going to talk about mini classic systems. We've already seen two come out from Nintendo, the NES and SNES Classic, and I'd say that these systems set the benchmark for what we've all come to expect from classic mini consoles. Now, of course, many companies have attempted to compete with Nintendo in this arena, and as we've seen with the PlayStation Classic, even the most seasoned of game developers and publishers can fail incredibly hard if they don't work on the device enough. But now we're here looking at a much sought-after classic system that gamers from all over have been craving, the Sega Genesis Mini. We were lucky enough to have the system sent in to us directly from Sega for review, and we spent a lot of time playing each and every single game. With no further delay, here is what was done right with the Sega Genesis Mini. Number one, the design of the system itself is small and well made. It has movable parts that make it feel like a real tiny Sega Genesis, which is a nice added touch. Number two, the controllers feel great to hold and are exact replicas of the original 3-button controller. Number three, included on the console are a handful of games that are basically unique to the system. Darius, which was never released on the console, Tetris, a very rare Genesis cartridge, and Monster World 4 and Mega Man The Wily Wars, which had never had proper physical releases in North America. These are all great reasons to pick up the system to play these rare and in some cases impossible to find games. If that was all there was to say about the Genesis Mini, then this would be an easy sell in my opinion. But unfortunately, there is a lot more to talk about. Now, I think it's important to remember this isn't Sega's first plug-and-play console, because in the past, Sega had worked with ad games who, in my opinion, are responsible for some of the worst reproduction consoles I've ever seen. Believe me, I know. Their products are flooded with a number of issues and problems that, while individually might be small, when they are combined, they become a much larger issue. But with the Genesis Mini, Sega parted ways with ad games. So this final product is a demonstration of what Sega can accomplish without the influence of ad games. Is it a success? Well, it's complicated. First, let's talk about the library of games. There are a number of great titles here, like Castlevania Bloodlines, Comix Zone, Contra Hardcore, combined with some Sega standards like Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. In some instances, you're not even limited to the one version of the game. If you switch the console's language to Japanese, you can get a game like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine to turn into its original Japanese version called Puyo Puyo, which you might actually be familiar with. If you switch the language to a European language like German, you can also find the European versions of games as well. This is a very nice feature, and something that not even Nintendo had offered on their systems. You really get the full scope of any game with the ability to explore all of its regional differences. But with that said, there are some omissions from the library that any Sega Genesis fan will find questionable. From Sega's own internal library, they're missing Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Sonic & Knuckles, and even Sonic 3D Blast. Now, regardless of how you feel about any of these games, they deserve to be here, especially considering the added abilities that Sonic & Knuckles has on the lock-on cart when combined with Sonic 2 or Sonic 3. There are also entries of specific franchises like Shinobi, Shining Force, Phantasy Star Columns, and several others absent from this library. For example, Columns 1 is here, but not 3. I'd argue 3 is the better of the two games, and this is even more baffling when you consider that Sega outright owns most of these games completely and likely could have included them with no problem at all. You might be thinking the reason for keeping the overall game count so low is that they focus on quality. If the team gave their attention to just a few games, they could keep the overall quality of the console high. Well, we'll have more to say about that, but first, let's talk about the interface. The main menu on the system is slick with a great soundtrack. It feels very Sega of the 90s, and when you change the language setting, the visual theme of your digital library swaps out for something that fits better for that region. It's an incredibly nice touch. You got a handful of options to modify the visuals of the games. Not a lot, but there are some basic options here. Stretch the screen into forced widescreen, which you should never do. A simple CRT mode to make your modern day HD TV look like an old tube TV. And if you're rocking the original aspect ratio, which you should be, you've got some borders to pick from. Not a lot, just 2, in addition to a standard solid black one, which is your third option, but that's all I usually use anyways. And let's not forget the save state support, giving you an option to save wherever and whenever you want. Now, this is all nice, but the games are where the problems begin. Some games simply don't run the way they should. We noticed that a few games like Monster World 4 have squished visuals. This makes the whole game look warped and also causes pixel shimmering, something you don't see on the Xbox 360 release of the same game. Now, as far as we are aware, both versions of this game were ported by the exact same group. So we're kind of surprised to see this problem. You'll also find the same visual issue with Wonder Boy in Monster World and Mega Man The Wily Wars. This doesn't make the games unplayable, but it is noticeable. But the visual issues are not the only problem. Kid Chameleon has some kind of audio bug. The music seems to glitch slightly in random spots, missing a note here or there and stopping a note faster than it should. I didn't play every game all the way through, so there's a possibility that it could be happening with other games as well, but it was most noticeable with me, at least, in Kid Chameleon. The biggest problem, though, is in the controls. Now, I did say the 3-button Genesis controller is a really good quality reproduction, but I think everyone knows what I'm about to say here. They should have included a 6-button controller with the North American units, not the 3. However, the folks at Retrobit sent us their Sega Genesis 6-button and Sega Saturn USB gamepads to review. We tried both on the Genesis Mini, and they both worked. The games that make use of the extra buttons, like Street Fighter 2, are way more playable with Retrobit's 6-button controller than the ones included in the box. Regardless of which controller you use, there's an overall problem that will affect every single game you play. Whenever you play seemingly anything on the system, you'll probably notice a double input issue. Now, right out of the gate, you'll notice this on the main menu immediately. As you tap your way through the menu, left or right, up or down, sometimes your input will simply be duplicated unexpectedly. Basically, you can tap any direction once and the system will think you're tapping it twice. This is a really, really bad problem. I had initially assumed this was just an issue with the controllers included in the box, but after thoroughly testing the Genesis Mini and Retrobit controllers on my PC, I couldn't replicate the problem. This leads me to believe that it's either a software or hardware issue with the Genesis Mini itself. The controllers Retrobit has released are basically flawless. For any other use case, I'd recommend them to anyone looking to get that authentic Sega feel for games on any platform that will accept these USB gamepads. But it seems that for the Sega Genesis Mini, at least, it doesn't matter what you use because it just won't work well. A double input issue might be more noticeable in some games than others, but it did seem to be present in each one. I had trouble playing almost every game on the system, leading me to question if I was just playing the games poorly or if it was the double input causing problems. Almost every game I played just felt like it was a little bit off. This was something we asked Sega about, but we didn't actually hear back from them on that. We're not sure if it can be fixed at home through a download or if it's an internal hardware fault, but as it stands now, this is enough of a problem that the console can't really be called perfect. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some of the games themselves. You get Tetris for Genesis on here, which is a cool game to include. Tetris for Sega Genesis is an ultra-rare game to find physically, but what we have here is a game that seemingly plays worse than it should. Tetris on the NES and Game Boy is slick, responsive, fun, and addictive. However, the version that is available here might be one of the worst versions of Tetris I have ever played. I've never played an original physical copy of this game due to its rarity, but the double input problem we mentioned seems to make playing this game really impossible at higher levels. Controls seem to lock up at points and perform actions you don't actually want to make. I'm by no means the best Tetris player in the world, but I've been able to do far better on several other versions of the game. Even though this game has plenty of historical relevance, I'd say it's simply not worth playing. Darius is an incredible arcade game, and for those not in the know, the original version used multiple monitors to create an ultra-wide view that was incredible for its time. The native aspect ratio is even wider than the widescreen TVs we have today, feeling more at home on an ultra-wide monitor. So why does this matter? Well, because there was never a version of Darius released on the Sega Genesis. From what we understand, this was made for the mini console in the style of an original Genesis game that was simply released for fun. It is fully playable, and if you're a fan of Darius, you might like this. But unfortunately, this kind of doesn't work for me. See, we have widescreen TVs now, so why was the game ported down to a 4:3 aspect ratio? They could have made this game in its original aspect ratio and it would have looked fine on a regular HD widescreen. If they really wanted the 4:3 version on here for that retro feel, that's okay, but at least include the original arcade release as well. The original Darius isn't a really easy game to get your hands on these days, so having the arcade release on here would have been great. It's confusing, and I personally prefer the arcade release to this one. Next up is Virtua Fighter 2. The inclusion of Virtua Fighter 2 on here is a mistake. It's simply not as good compared to the original arcade release, which was a game known for its impressive 3D visuals. The Sega Genesis version is a joke by comparison, as it's only in 2D. There is simply no reason to include this on the console, especially while Street Fighter 2 is on here. The original arcade version should have been available with this release as a side attraction to show where it came from and what they did with the limited specs of the Sega Genesis. Space Harrier 2, in my opinion, is not very good. This sequel simply doesn't hold up against Space Harrier either on the original arcade release or even on the Sega 32X. It plays worse, sounds worse, and looks worse all at the same time. The 32X version of Space Harrier would have been a lot more fun to play and a great way to show off what Genesis was capable of doing when combined with that kind of hardware. There are only a handful of 32X games, and likely there will never be a classic version of that platform. Not including any 32X games at all was a very questionable move, especially considering that the hardware was capable of impressive visuals for its time. Now, a lot of people didn't get to try out the 32X when it was out, and even to this day, it is largely ignored. This could have wowed modern gamers with an example of Sega's ingenuity and inventive ideas they had during the Sega Genesis era. If not including any 32X games is a mistake, not having any Sega CD games is completely crazy. Sega CD has a library of games still unreleased on any other platform to this day. Of course, I gotta bring up Snatcher, the only English version of the game to ever be released, but there are other games included on the Genesis Mini which actually have Sega CD versions that are different enough to warrant being included. How could we forget Sonic CD, a Sonic game? The CD hardware was revolutionary for its time, and to see Sega avoid it is just plain dumb. As problematic as I find the game selection to be, I have to bring up again the troubling quality of the emulation on this console. We had already seen their classic Genesis games brought back to life in the Sega Genesis Classics collection. I found this to be one of the better examples of Sega emulation done well, and if you have a desire to go and revisit Genesis, this might be the path to take. It includes way more games, has a lot more options, and if you already own a platform that you can play it on, well, it's probably cheaper. Hard to recommend the Sega Genesis Mini when Sega already presented us with one of the best options ever to play their older games. So, can I recommend the Sega Genesis Mini? Probably not. At least not for everyone. Some games might play well, but others will be noticeably bad. Puzzle games specifically, like Tetris or Puyo Puyo, which I would consider unplayable in this state. The only folks I could recommend that should pick up the Sega Genesis Mini are people who might not care that much about the games running well or simply want a tiny collectible system. But in my humble opinion, I'd hold off for a fix, if one ever comes at all.
On Tuesday, directly after I uploaded the video about John Bolton being ousted from the Trump administration, calling on the Trump administration to hire Douglas McGregor for coins, and one of the video that was posted.
Oh my, so good.
Very many, how do I put this, hype moments. In RE1, all the way up to Code Veronica, it felt like there was something really big happening. Can I ask you for a favor? Can I just ask you for a solid planet? Just for a little while, can you just stop doing stupid stuff? See, Dad's trying to get some work done. I'm trying to finish the brand new website, Free Domain, and also tonight, of course, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, I have dropping episode 6 in my ongoing series on California. So I hope you'll join me for that on YouTube. So latest stupid stuff, which I think bears a tiny response, is former Blink-1-Eye Canadian Prime Minister Kim Campbell thought it would be an excellent and wonderful and judicious. What's on one journey from the quartering, and we've been covering the new Terminator Dark Fate movie, also known as Dominator with T-1000 in it. And more than anything, the movie just looks bad. I think trotting out a geriatric Arnold is enough to get some boomers out to maybe check out the film. But the Terminator franchise in and of itself has basically been backsliding for years after essentially setting the gold standard in CGI from what I remember in the early 90s with Terminator 1 and 2, or particularly Terminator 2. The rest of the Terminator movies have done a hodgepodge of near misses and outright disasters up until this point, but early projections are now coming in for Terminator Dark Fate, and it looks like the film is going to flop. Early projections using words like soft to show for the film, even while evidence clearly points to nobody wanted this film, nobody asked for this film, nobody's going to see this film. Now, if you remember just 2 months ago, they tried the same tired approach that, for example, Star Wars The Last Jedi did, or more particularly, a better example would be the early promotion of the Ghostbusters 26. Where they say it responds to a movie that everyone wishes they could forget. Anybody who ever was a fan of Ghostbusters in particular really wants that stain removed from the franchise forever. They tried, I think, when early testing showed that the CGI in a modern-day Ghostbusters movie somehow managed to look significantly worse than the originals. They tried to push out this, men don't want to see our movie, so women should totally buy 2 tickets. Now, this apparently worked to some degree with
a bit more care is being put into it for the fans. And we have a release date now. That's the exciting part, because originally early 2020, it is very early 2020. Like it is close to 2019. It's only about 2 weeks into 2020. That's right. There's going to be a release date in Japan January 16th, but then immediately after that, we did see a release date that's coming to the US. This was from Bandai US, where they say January 17th. They even showed off a little teaser on Twitter for the Boo Saga. There was even a collector's edition that's like $200 that has this big, like, the dragon statue with Goku riding it and everything. Looks awesome, by the way. Really looking forward to this. PS4, Xbox One, and PC on January 17th. Again, for people asking, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Switch port at some time. I think this is something Bandai's been working on for a while now. Like, they did announce it, earlier this year, and then it's coming out right at the beginning of this year coming up. I feel like it's early 2020 just because there wasn't much room for it in 2019, and they wanted to give it a pretty good chance where there aren't as many games around. But, I mean, the Dragon Ball fans are going to show up, and we're going to buy this game anyway and play it. I'm really looking forward to it. Glad to hear it's not like February or March and we're getting it like 2 weeks into 2020. But let me know if you're picking up Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, because I'm still interested in some of the, I guess, the gameplay, the RPG elements and stuff, but they're going to have multiple playable characters, all kinds of stories all over the place. Really cool for Dragon Ball fans like myself. Next up, let's talk about that trailer, Final Fantasy VII Remake from Tokyo Game Show. This game is looking phenomenal so far. Like, I am really excited for this game. Look, when I was growing up, of course, the PS1, the N64 were right there, right? Like the primary focuses of my time in like middle school and everything, early middle school, and then going into the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era. But if there's a game that I specifically remember, it's Final Fantasy VII. It was massively talked about in school and everything because it was this crazy 3D RPG, something we had really never seen before to that scale. And now we're getting a beloved RPG remade, and man, the details in this game look crazy. Remember Advent Children? We are getting so close to that, the visuals of that in a video game on the PS4. Like, we're that close. And if this does end up spilling over into the PS5, which I assume it will, like, we'll probably get this ported to the PS5, and then I assume the project will continue on there, or they'll just continue developing for the PS4, and it'll just be backwards compatible or ported with extra, visual features and everything. But the trailer they showed looks amazing. It was more in depth. They showed different parts of the game. I would go check it out. They showed some pretty cool mini games where you're working out stuff by doing the button presses. They showed Tifa doing pull-ups and Cloud working out as well, which was part of the game. And then they do show they show different parts where the Turks and Shinra are involved, and it does look like they're really getting in depth with parts of the story that I didn't know if they would have originally, but they're doing it. It looks like the whole cross-dressing scene with Cloud and Tifa and Aerith that's all in there, and the amount of detail with some of these characters is amazing. Like, I know people are annoyed that it looks like it's all going to take place basically on the first disc of the game, maybe even like shorter than that. But it sounds like they're going to have quite a bit of content in it. They're claiming like 60 hours of game here just in this part. And I'm glad they're spending their time really like fleshing out parts of the story rather than trying to rush through it and get, take all of Final Fantasy 7 and basically just tell the entire story all over again. I like that we're getting little looks in different parts of the game that we did before. And it seems like they're going to spend quite a bit of time on some of the cutscenes and everything as they showed parts of the only
few eggs and turned on your TV to some men.
After fully working on the situation, we take our first step inside the facility. Like Rick said earlier, this place is super abandoned, but knowing there are dinosaurs on the loose, we have to keep our guard up. Climbing up into a ventilation shaft and exploring further, we find the control room where Rick is waiting. Rick is doubtful about all of this dinosaur talk. I guess he didn't see any dinos on the way in. I think he's just happy that Gale is missing. Rick lets Regina know that this place's security system is complicated. He won't be able to power up all of the areas yet from this one station. After this, Regina heads out. Her follows is familiar Survivor Horror gameplay, finding items, dodging past enemies, and solving puzzles. And that's actually where I'm going to cut the story recap, because Dino Crisis is a very short game, and I don't want to get too spoilery with this video. This game's story is simple but effective. Dino Crisis is about 6 to 8 hours in length, just like Capcom's other horror games. Overall, I'd say that the story is pretty good. It's very Resident Evil, except instead of starting in a relatively normal-looking location and then finding a robust laboratory, in DC you're basically in and out of labs for the majority of the game. The story definitely goes places, and there is actually a very nice sci-fi twist on figuring why the dinosaurs are in the modern day. I think it's both fun and explained well. The problem I have with the story is that while this game is really fun,
claiming that a Mexican cartoon frog is a symbol of hate, I think they lost the plot a little bit, Because here's the thing, I'm pretty sure that, so yeah, I genuinely do not agree with what the ADL is doing. And If you're going to claim that you're a civic rights organization, then why aren't you fighting for human rights? How can you claim that you're fighting for human rights when free speech is something that the United Nations signed on their charter as being a human right? And I know that free speech isn't absolute, right? Like blackmailing, incitement to violence, and all these things, yeah, they don't constitute free speech. But making a joke, making a meme with a frog as a cartoon is definitely 100% free speech. And the fact that the ADL is now, deciding to police jokes is very concerning. So, like I personally do not agree with the way this organization is going. And I think this is why a lot of the fans from PewDiePie also do not appreciate the fact that he has decided to donate money to an organization that used to be against him, that tried to ruin him in the past, and is also, imagine this, you're just a random guy on the internet, you're using the Pepe the Frog meme, you're not a racist, but now people are claiming you are because the ADL says so. That is collateral damage. So I get like a lot of people are now upset, and I guess the racists maybe got what they wanted, because that's really it. Like a racist isn't upset if he is called a racist. He'll admit it. But if he can manage to get other people caught in the crossfires, then, more people are going to be radicalized. Now, I understand the concern of some people that would say, well, stop bringing our postmodernist, deconstruction, critical theory bullshit into this. Like, if that's the case, when can you say that a symbol belongs to a specific group? Because obviously, like, a symbol can be used by multiple people. And I think it's like when a symbol is used almost exclusively by a group, that's when it becomes part of the group. For example, the hammer and sickle. People who aren't communists rarely will use the symbol unless they're a historian or something, right? The American flag. People who aren't American aren't likely to fly the American flag. The swastika. People who aren't Nazis aren't, like that. Those are symbols that legitimately are assessed to a specific organization. And you're not going to do collateral damage if you're going to say, yeah, people who fly the American flag are patriots, for example. It might happen that a person who isn't a patriot might fly the American flag, but that is very rare. Meanwhile, if you look at Pepe the Frog, I mean, that 3 years ago, almost all Trump supporters were doing it on the internet, not because they were racist, but because it upset people, and it was funny to upset someone by using a Mexican frog. Like it's a cartoon. A cartoon Mexican is not even real, it's fictional. And people were getting upset. So yeah, that's why they did it. It wasn't because they're racist. But anyway, right, so let's look at PewDiePie explaining why he donated money. So he tweeted out that misrepresenting headlines of him has led him down a path of twists with the mainstream media for years now. Previously, it hasn't bothered him so much. I know who I am. But after the Christchurch travesty a few months ago, his own clash with the mainstream media was manipulated as a tool for destruction. I'm not okay with this situation any longer, and I felt responsibility to make changes. Making that donation to the ADL doesn't make sense to everyone, especially since they've outright spoken against me. I wanted to show publicly that I can move past it and move on. I think it's important this isn't my fight anymore. So, this is what I don't get. Like, I understand the ADL, the American Defense League, is an organization that is designed to protect Jewish people against anti-Semitism. So is PewDiePie saying that like terrorist attack in mosque happens, Jews are most affected? Like, why did he donate money to Linda Sarsour or something? Huh? I mean, at least he didn't donate money to the Northern Filthy Rich Outlaw Center. See what I did there. Okay, so I get it, it's fucked up. Like, I genuinely can't imagine how it is to wake up in the morning and know that a mass murderer, a terrorist, committed crimes and uttered your name. And maybe PewDiePie actually feels guilty about it. I genuinely don't know. Like, he seems like a good guy. He donates money.
Quite honestly, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Hi, my name is Sydney. Welcome back to my channel. You know what we haven't done in a little while? Laughed at crazy leftists, which is, believe it or not, one of my favorite things to do. We have a long history of that here. So today I thought we could take a break from all the seriousness in the world, because it's depressing, to laugh at some dumb things that I found on the internet recently. You know, like how we should be eating other dead human beings in order to fight climate change. That's not a joke. Or how someone created a chair for bisexual people because they can't sit straight. Also not a joke. Or how the city of Perth in Australia has decided to make Christmas less Christian. That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually kidding. It makes no sense at all. Even Monopoly made a version of the game that is designed to help women get further ahead than men by giving them more money. In the game, they don't try to do that in real life. But rest assured, none of this was quite as dumb as a video that Now This News released recently. In this video, they claim that referring to women as guys, in the sense of using the colloquial term to say, like, hey guys, or whatever, is apparently sexist and I guess offensive to women. I mean, because really, what's not offensive to these people these days? Hey guys seems innocuous, but here's why you might want to try a different greeting. This should be good.
Guys is a simple term. It could mean boys, or if you're modern, hip, it means people. At first glance, guys seems inviting, friendly, maybe warm, even comedic at times. But it, like many male default terms, should not be normalized as an all-encompassing phrase, innocent as it may seem. While we may understand the word means no real harm, with a deeper look, you'll understand that we've been ignoring the cognitive impact on women as well as gender non-conforming folks by only explicitly addressing the male-identifying individuals present.
Okay, yeah. So if you missed it, the implication here is that it hurts women when you refer to them as guys, because apparently it excludes them. And you guessed it, only includes men, even though the term is literally defined in the dictionary to mean person, used in plural to refer to members of a group regardless of sex. Have a glass of water there, Karen. It's gonna be all right.
For decades, we have set a standard of only addressing the men in the room. Of course, we claim it's colloquial, but with our elevated knowledge and inclusive perspective, it just seems lazy, inconsiderate, and a small part of what reinforces the gender hierarchy today.
I wonder if that's the same gender hierarchy that gives women shorter prison sentences.
How is one to feel empowered to speak or assert themselves when upon greeting, they're misgendered or even ignored in language? Can we be surprised that for decades, women often felt uncomfortable asserting their voice when we didn't even take the time to properly acknowledge them?
Obviously, I'm a female, at least I'm pretty sure. I plainly don't understand the mentality of women who are so fragile that they feel that you have to acknowledge their gender at every given opportunity, like during every interaction that you have with them. Ever. Karen, honey, of all the things I'm interested in, your lady bits are not one of them. So just breaking down the logic here for a hot second, because guys has historically referred to men, now it can't be applied to women. But equally, by that exact same logic, every person ever who has been referred to as a guy could be offended because historically, the word also meant someone who was grotesque in appearance. That's not a joke. But genuinely, it makes absolutely no sense to act like the current meaning of the word doesn't count simply because it has historical origins meaning something different. Stop that.
These linguistic tendencies were developed and reinforced in eras where women were barely meant to be seen and certainly not heard.
Now, Karen, I don't mean to burst your bubble or anything, but I looked into this a little. And apparently, by the early 1930s, Americans were only just beginning to use guys to refer to both men and women. When you then look at the frequency of the word's use in television and media, you find that it really didn't become popularized until the 1970s and onward. So really, if you think about it logically, which I know is not a feminist strong suit, we really started to use the term to refer to everyone, including women, well into women's suffrage. I mean, if you're looking on the bright side of life like I like to do, you could even say that the reason the word became so popular is because women were being included in like societal discussions or whatever. Point is, women were being heard. In fact, we still hear you. My God, do we hear you?
But when you stop valuing the personhood and visibility of individuals, you make it easier to dehumanize them on a macro scale minimizing his, her, its, their right to respect and equality. I'm not offended, per se, if someone lumps me in with the guys. I'm sure there's really no malintent. In fact, if you and your friends want to freely address each other, by all means. I just want you to know that you're one small step away from making a more conscious effort to dismantle the patriarchy.
Who would have thought that not saying guys is actually fighting the patriarchy?
Don't believe me? Try walking into a room full of cisgender heterosexual men and triumphantly announce, "Hey gals, okay girls, thanks sis." I'm sure within 10 minutes, if not seconds, at least one person will correct you. We should all be as protective of our gender identities as a cisgender heterosexual man.
Oh my God, it's like they're not even trying. Nobody refers to women and men collectively by any of those terms. Those terms are specifically reserved for women, or by 2019 standards, humanoids with XX chromosomes. It would basically be the same thing as referring to everyone as boys or lads or dudes. Actually, come to think of it, dudes is becoming pretty gender neutral now. I guess avoiding using that word will also help you fight the patriarchy. But yeah, powerful. My goodness, that was rough.
Going to go to 1 minute 12.
Creepy people, then to a generic term for men, and now, some would say, a gender-neutral phrase.
Not some would say, a gender-neutral phrase. People such as yourselves are the only people who seem to be offended by this word. This is not an issue. This is a non-problem.
For decades, we have set a standard of only addressing the men in the room.
And again, this is the second time that you said that. That is not the case, and I have explained why.
How is one to feel empowered to speak or assert themselves when upon greeting they're misgendered or even ignored?
They're not being ignored in the language. They're not being misgendered because in this particular context, look, I don't know how many times I have to keep explaining it, but now she's going to show some archival footage from what looks like the 50s or something.
Language. Can we be surprised that for decades women often felt uncomfortable asserting their voice when we didn't even take the time to properly acknowledge them?
This is just complete historical revisionist bullshit. My grandmothers and my mother very much asserted themselves in the household. This is complete garbage. Gender roles were traditional in the past. That's what made them work, I would argue. Nowadays, they've been broken down. But the past, and I don't want to just look back here with steamed up nostalgic glasses or something, but to be honest, it's far better than the clown world we've inherited, unfortunately.
Tendencies were developed and reinforced in eras where women were barely meant to be seen and certainly not heard.
What's the actual hell? Like, remember that expression, women, children should be seen and not heard? Women are not children. No. Yeah. Let's just carry on.
Please note, you're not a bad feminist if you're comfortable with using the phrase guys. There are larger issues that we, the feminists, need to combat.
There are larger issues that you, the feminists, could combat on behalf of some women in parts of the world where they have less rights than women do in the West. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about innocuous things like the word guys.
Reproductive rights, rape culture, violence against women.
Yes, there's violence against women. It's called a crime, and the law deals with crimes. And also, as a man, you're more likely to be a victim of violent crime. So, there you go.
LGBTQ rights.
I thought they had the rights they wanted.
And the general reprogramming of most people's minds when it comes to the valuation of women in society. But when you stop valuing the personhood and visibility of individuals, you make it easier to dehumanize them on a macro scale.
Stop. I can't stop. Just enough. You're talking horse shit. It's just meaningless words now. Dehumanize and all this kind of stuff and personhood and visibility and value. Stop. It's just a word. It's just guys. All right. It has no other meaning, and you are deliberately trying to create an issue out of an absolute nothing. And it's just painful.
Minimizing his, her, its, their right to respect and equality.
It's just his and her. And I would argue that this nonsense about anyone who refers to themselves as it, that's pretty dehumanizing, isn't it? Who would do such a thing?
I'm not offended per se if someone loves playing with guys. I'm sure there's really no malintent.
There isn't, so that's the most important thing. End of the video. No, there's still a minute, 50-something seconds.
In fact, if you and your friends want to freely address each other, by all means. I just want you to know that you're one small step away from making a more conscious effort to dismantle the patriarchy.
Brilliant. Yes, she dropped the P word, patriarchy. It's not like completely dismantled at this point. Come on, if you haven't dismantled it already, I'm pretty certain it was dismantled. I was out for a walk earlier on. I walked past it, actually. I saw the patriarchy, and it was up on bricks. And some of the windows were smashed, and I'm fairly certain someone had taken a key all along the side of the passenger door. Maybe that was just a car I saw. I don't know why I always get those two mixed up. Maybe because the patriarchy drives me crazy. I let myself out.
You don't believe me? Try walking into a room full of cisgender heterosexual men and triumphantly announce, "Hey gals, okay girls, thanks sis." I'm sure within 10 minutes, if not seconds, at least one person will correct you. We should all be as protective of our gender identities as a cisgender heterosexual man.
Get your hands on me, gender identities, Lucky Charms. Gender identities, like Pokemon. You gotta catch them all.
Substitute one "hey guys" with a simple "good morning everyone." Hi y'all, folks, everybody, scholars.
Scholars?
Team if you're at work, campers if you're in the forest, Bay Hive because it's always appropriate.
I don't know what that is.
You can also just find ways to insert people's names and address everyone present.
Next week's episode of Now This, how to boil an egg. Let me explain to you how to do a high five, but in a non-offensive way. Who would find this content useful? Who takes this kind of stuff seriously?
And when in doubt, say nothing at all. Hey.
That expression, see? I did it. How are people not as smart as me? How can people not see how easy that is? See? I did it. And the world didn't fall apart. Hey guys, it's Dave. I'm just gonna keep doing it for now.
Works.
Works. It works. Told ya.
I challenge you to take an extra 0.5 seconds to think about what comes out of your mouth before you say it.
This is sanctimonious. Sorry, guys. I can't do that. Guys?
Somewhere along the way, hey, you may slip a guy out or two.
That was scripted very badly. Just read that again. Somewhere along the line, hey, you may slip a guy out or two. Hey guys, welcome to another person in the world has been cured of HIV. If this story is true,
silly or too PC.
it's incredibly PC, yes. And it should be called out whenever it happens. Because no, under absolutely no circumstances am I changing my language to accommodate it.
But there are only larger societal.
Hello and welcome to Insider Talk TV. I'm Judy Lawson with the precious happenings in the world of medicine without the crack.
The way we use it and weaponize it. Face it, the things we do and say matter.
Either. Some of the people say and do are not profound and not all that important. Some ideas are very important and profound and meaningful and it can change the course of history, but no. Most of the things we say and do are not all that important. From day to day, they're just going about their day and they're meeting friends and family and they're saying things like guys and whatever. And that's that. And this kind of horse shit is trying to create issues where they don't exist. And sorry, I reject it completely. No, the things we do and say sometimes can be very important. Most of the time, no. And the word guys is not important. And it's not an issue.
So if you do nothing else, repeat after me. I am powerful.
I am powerful. What's that going to do anyway? Seems a bit stranding. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out if this really has a genuine audience. Like, is this aimed at Gen Zers? I hope they don't take it serious. Anyway, I'll leave it there, guys. And when I said guys, not just referring to my male audience, but also my female audience, which is about, I don't know, 9% of my total subscriber base. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. And guys, make sure you subscribe. And guys, that like button. Guys, please comment below. And guys, also follow me over on Minds and Gab and BitChute. Because you never know, guys. You just never know. Anyway, again, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, guys. And guys, I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.
Today on Re-Res, we're going to talk about mini classic systems. We've already seen two come out from Nintendo, the NES and SNES Classic, and I'd say that these systems set the benchmark for what we've all come to expect from classic mini consoles. Now, of course, many companies have attempted to compete with Nintendo. All over have been craving the Sega Genesis Mini. We were lucky enough to have the system sent in to us directly from Sega for review, and we spent a lot of time playing each and every single game. With no further delay, here is what was done right with the Sega Genesis Mini. Number one, the design of the system itself is small and well made. It has movable parts that make it feel like a tiny Sega Genesis, which is a nice added touch. Number two, the controllers feel great to wear and are exact replicas of the original 3-button controller. Number three, included on the console are a handful of games that are basically unique to the system. Darius, which was never released on the console, Tetris, a very rare Genesis cartridge, and Monster Hunter and Mega Man the Wily Wars, which have never had proper physical releases in North America. These are all great reasons to pick up the system to play these rare and in some cases impossible to find games. If that was all there was to say about the Genesis Mini, then this would be an easy sell in my opinion. But unfortunately, there's a lot more to talk about. Now, I think it's important to remember this isn't Sega's first plug-and-play console, because in the past, Sega had worked with ad games who, in my opinion, are responsible for some of the worst reproduction consoles I've ever seen. Believe me, I know. Their products are flooded with a number of issues and problems that, while individually might be small, they're combined, they become a much larger issue. But with the Genesis Mini, Sega parted ways with ad games. So this final product is a demonstration of what Sega can accomplish without the influence of ad games. Is it a success? Well, it's complicated. First, let's talk about the library of games. There are a number of great titles here, like Castlevania Bloodlines, Comic Zone, Contra Hardcore, combined with some Sega standards like Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2. In some instances, you're not even limited to the one version of the game. If you switch the console's language to Japanese, you can get a game like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine to turn into its original Japanese version called Puyo Puyo, which you might actually be familiar with. If you switch the language to a European language like German, you can also find the European versions of games as well. This is a very nice feature, and something that not even Nintendo had offered on their systems. You really get the full scope of any game with the ability to explore all of its regional differences. But with that said, there are some omissions from the library that any Sega Genesis fan will find questionable.
18 foram divulgados dados atualizados coletados pela Embrapa Territorial a partir das informações mantidas no Sistema Nacional de Cadastro Ambiental, o SICAR, pelo Serviço Florestal Brasileiro, SFB. Os dados da Embrapa apontam a área total destinada à preservação, manutenção e proteção da vegetação nativa do Brasil ocupa 66,3% do território. Nesse número estão os espaços preservados pelo segmento rural, as unidades de conservação integral, as terras indígenas, as terras devolutas e as ainda não cadastradas no SICAR. Elas somam 631 milhões de hectares, área equivalente a 48 países da Europa somados. Em fevereiro de 2018, agricultores, pecuaristas, silvicultores e extrativistas destinavam à preservação da vegetação nativa mais de 218 milhões de hectares, o equivalente a 1/4 do território nacional, 25,6%. Em média, é como se cada produtor rural brasileiro utilizasse apenas 50% de suas terras. A outra metade é ocupada com áreas de preservação permanente, às margens de corpos d'água e topos de morros, reserva legal e vegetação excedente. O Centro de Pesquisa estimou o valor do patrimônio fundiário imobilizado em preservação ambiental e chegou à cifra de 3,1 trilhões de reais. Em 2016, a Embrapa Territorial já havia calculado a ocupação com a produção. O Brasil utiliza apenas 7,6% do seu território com lavouras, somando 63.998.479 hectares e preserva 66% do seu território. Os dados da NASA, a Índia, intensificam.
I'm just a garbage human being. I absolutely love this story. Hey everybody, what's going on? Take a look at this. We're over at the American Thinker. This has happened before, where these people, they go out on these global warming, climate change tours on these boats, and they get stuck. They get stuck in ice. And my favorite part about this stuff is none of these people on this tour, these cult members to climate change, this won't change their mind about anything. They're just going to keep fully drinking the climate change Kool-Aid. So take a look at this over at American Thinker. Once again, climate warriors rescued from their ship trapped in polar ice. Warmists never learn. The conviction that global warming is melting ice in the polar regions has once again led to climate warriors into danger and the need for rescue. The MS Malmo, a Swedish registered ship, was just rescued after being trapped in ice, and its passengers airlifted to safety. Get a load of what it was doing in the Maritime Bulletin. Arctic tour ship MS Malmo with 16 passengers on board got stuck in ice on September 3rd off Longyearbyen Svalbard archipelago, halfway between Norway and the North Pole. But how did it get stuck? There's not supposed to be any ice up there. Al Gore and the Democrats told everybody that there would be no ice anywhere on this planet after 2012, right? That was the whole point of that inconvenient truth climate propaganda movie that they still pump into our schools these days, by the way. Well, big surprise, they're wrong about that. No, there's tons of ice up there. That's why these idiots are stuck in it. All 16 climate change warriors were evacuated by helicopter in challenging conditions. All are safe. 7 crew remains on board, waiting for Coast Guard ship assistance. So there you have it. Not only did these numbnuts get stuck in ice that wasn't supposed to exist up there, but they had to put into jeopardy the life of an air crew to come rescue them, right? Again, this is a helicopter not running off of a chug its way all the way out into the middle of nowhere. I don't know, break the ice for these people, push them out. Who knows what's going to happen? But they're burning a crap ton of CO2 while telling everybody, watch out for the climate change. I mean, they're filming a climate change documentary on this boat that's stuck in that ice. Hey, do you think this will be mentioned in that documentary? Oh, watch out. There's not going to be any more ice on this planet because of the climate changes. By the way, we got stuck in a bunch of ice. No, man, that part's going to be inconveniently cut from this documentary. They're going to show all of the empty water or the little ice cubes as you approach the Arctic. They're going to be like, this used to be a massive amount of ice. All the polar bears and the penguins and the sea lions that were all around us are all dead now because of those evil Republicans. And then they're going to chastise us about CO2. Meanwhile, they got a big diesel engine on that boat, and then they need a helicopter rescue. They need a whole other boat to come get them. Oh, you lefties. You're monsters. And here's the best part. This is why I'm such a garbage human being, because it keeps happening. Haven't we heard of something like this before? Oh, yeah. I wrote about this 5.5 years ago. Warmest dupes and true believers in the media are having a very hard time with the hilarious spectacle of a ship of literal fools who were so deluded by the warmist cult as to believe that it was safe to venture into the Antarctic waters in a vessel that was not an icebreaker. The, quote, scientific expedition was intended to document the comparative paucity of ice in the area first explored by Douglas Mawson a century ago. As nearly everyone connected to the media on the planet knows, the spirit of Monsoon Voyage, as the organizers dubbed their chartered Russian ship, the MV Academic Shurinsky, became stuck in ice and needed rescue. Adding to the comedy, the Chinese icebreaker that rescued them is now itself stuck in ice that was supposed to be melting. But of course, no amount of factual evidence, no amount of gigantic ice cubes floating around, trapping all of these climate change boats is going to change any of these lefties' minds, because it doesn't have anything to do with science or fact. It just has to do with cultish rhetoric. So there you have it, guys. More proof that these cult members will put themselves in danger and then put other people's lives in danger to come rescue them in order to fulfill their cult worship of climate change. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. If you're interested in more content covering this culture war, make sure you hit the subscribe button. All right, guys, take care. Bye.
From Sega's own internal library, even Sonic 3D Blast. Now, regardless of how you feel about any of these games, they deserve to be here, considering the added abilities that Sonic and Knuckles has on the lock-on part when combined with Sonic 2 or Sonic 3. There are also entries of specific franchises like Shinobi, Shining Force, Phantasy Star, Columns, and several others absent from this library. For example, Columns 1 is here, but not 3. I'd argue 3 is the better of the two games, and this is even more baffling when you consider that Sega outright owns most of these games completely, and likely could have included them with no problem at all. You might be thinking the reason for keeping the overall game count so low is that they could focus on quality. If the team gave their attention to just a few games, they could keep the overall quality of the console high. Well, we'll have more to say about that, but first, let's talk about the interface. The main menu on the system is slick with a great soundtrack. It feels very Sega of the 90s. And when you change the language setting, the visual theme of your digital library swaps out for something that fits better for that region. It's an incredibly nice touch. You got a handful of options to modify the visuals of the games. Not a lot, but there are some basic options here. Stretch the screen into forced widescreen, which you should never do. A simple CRT mode to make your modern day HD TV look like an old tube TV. And if you're rocking the original aspect ratio, which you should be, you've got some borders to pick from. Not a lot, just 2, in addition to a standard solid black one, which is your third option, but that's all I usually use anyways. And let's not forget the save state support, giving you an option to save wherever and whenever you want. Now, this is all nice, but the games are where the problems begin. Some games simply don't run the way they should. We noticed that a few games like Monster World 4 have squished visuals. This makes the whole game look warped and also causes pixel shimmering, something you don't see on the Xbox 360 release of the same game. Now, as far as we are aware, both versions of this game were ported by the exact same group. We're kind of surprised to see this problem. You'll also find the same visual issue with Wonder Boy and Monster World and Mega Man The Wily Wars. This doesn't make the games unplayable, but it is noticeable. But the visual issues are not the only problem. Kid Chameleon has some kind of audio bug. The music seems to glitch slightly in random spots, missing a note here or there, and stopping a note faster than it should. I didn't play every game all the way through, so there's a possibility that it could be happening with other games as well, but it was most noticeable with me, at least, in Kid Chameleon. The biggest problem, though, is in the controls. Now, I did say the 3-button Genesis controller is a really good quality reproduction, but I think everyone knows what I'm about to say here. They should have included a 6-button controller with the North American units, not the 3. However, the folks at RetroBit sent us their Sega Genesis 6-button and Sega Saturn USB gamepads to review. We tried both on the Genesis Mini, and they both worked. The games that make use of the extra buttons, like Street Fighter 2, are way more playable with RetroBit's 6-button controller than the ones included in the box. Regardless of which controller you use, there's an overall problem that will affect every single game you play. Whenever you play seemingly anything on the system, you'll probably notice a double input issue. Now, right out of the gate, you'll notice this on the main menu immediately. As you tap your way through the menu, left or right, up or down, sometimes your input will simply be duplicated unexpectedly. Basically, you can tap any direction once and the system will think you're tapping it twice. This is a really, really bad problem. I had initially assumed this was just an issue with the controllers included in the box, but after thoroughly testing the Genesis Mini and Retrobit controllers on my PC, I couldn't replicate the problem. This leads me to believe that it's either a software or hardware issue with the Genesis Mini itself. The controllers Retrobit has released are basically flawless. For any other use case, I'd recommend them to anyone looking to get that authentic Sega feel for games on any platform that will accept these USB gamepads. But it seems that for the Sega Genesis Mini, at least, it doesn't matter what you use because it just won't work well. A double input issue might be more noticeable in some games than others, but it did seem to be present in each one. I had trouble playing almost every game on the system, leading me to question if I was just playing the games poorly or if it was the double input causing problems. Almost every game I played just felt like it was a little bit off. This was something we asked Sega about, but we didn't actually hear back from them on that. We're not sure if it can be fixed at home through a download or if it's an internal hardware fault, but as it stands now, this is enough of a problem that the console can't really be called perfect. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some of the games themselves. You get Tetris for Genesis on here, which is a cool game to include. Tetris for Sega Genesis is an ultra-rare game to find physically, but what we have here is a game that seemingly plays worse than it should. Tetris on the NES and Game Boy is slick, responsive, fun, and addictive. However, the version that is available here might be one of the worst versions of Tetris I have ever played. I've never played an original physical copy of this game due to its rarity, but the double input problem we mentioned seems to make playing this game really impossible at higher levels. Controls seem to lock up at points and perform actions you don't actually want to make. I'm by no means the best Tetris player in the world, but I've been able to do far better on several other versions of the game. Even though this game has plenty of historical relevance, I'd say it's simply not worth playing. Darius is an incredible arcade game. For those not in the know, the original version used multiple monitors to create an ultra-wide view that was incredible for its time. The native aspect ratio is even wider than the widescreen TVs we have today, feeling more at home on an ultra-wide monitor. So why does this matter? Well, because there was never a version of Darius released on the Sega Genesis. From what we understand, this was made for the mini console in the style of an original Genesis game that was simply released for fun. It is fully playable, and if you're a fan of Darius, you might like this. But unfortunately, this kind of doesn't work for me. See, we have widescreen TVs now, so why was the game ported down to a 4:3 aspect ratio? They could have made this game in its original aspect ratio, and it would have looked fine on a regular HD widescreen. If they really wanted the 4:3 version on here for that retro feel, that's okay, but at least include the original arcade release as well. The original Darius isn't a really easy game to get your hands on these days, so having the arcade release on here would have been great. It's confusing, and I personally prefer the arcade release to this one. Next up is Virtua Fighter 2. The inclusion of Virtua Fighter 2 on here is a mistake. It's simply not as good compared to its original arcade release, which was a game known for its impressive 3D visuals. The Sega Genesis version is a joke by comparison, as it's only in 2D. There is simply no reason to include this on the console, especially while Street Fighter 2 is on here. The original arcade version should have been available with this release as a side attraction to show where it came from and what they did with the limited specs of the Sega Genesis. Space Harrier 2, in my opinion, is not very good. This sequel simply doesn't hold up against Space Harrier either on the original arcade release or even on the Sega 32X. It plays worse, sounds worse, and looks worse all at the same time. The 32X version of Space Harrier would have been a lot more fun to play and a great way to show off what Genesis was capable of doing when combined with that kind of hardware. There are only a handful of 32X games, and likely there will never be a classic version of that platform. Not including any 32X games at all was a very questionable move, especially considering that the hardware was capable of really impressive visuals for its time. Now, a lot of people didn't get to try out the 32X when it was out, and even to this day, it is largely ignored. This could have wowed modern gamers with an example of Sega's ingenuity and inventive ideas they had during the Sega Genesis era. If not including any 32X games is a mistake, not having any Sega CD games is completely crazy. Sega CD has a library of games still unreleased on any other platform to this day. Of course, I gotta bring up Snatcher, the only English version of the game to ever be released, but there are other games included on the Genesis Mini which actually have Sega CD versions that are different enough to warrant being included. How could we forget Sonic CD, a Sonic game? The CD hardware was revolutionary for its time, and to see Sega avoid it is just plain dumb. As problematic as I find the game selection to be, I have to bring up again the troubling quality of the emulation on this console. We had already seen their classic Genesis games brought back to life in the Sega Genesis Classics collection. I found this to be one of the better examples of Sega emulation done well, and if you have a desire to go and revisit Genesis, this might be the path to take. It includes way more games, has a lot more options, and if you already own a platform that you can play it on, well, it's probably cheaper. Hard to recommend the Sega Genesis Mini when Sega already presented us with one of the best options ever to play their older games. So, can I recommend the Sega Genesis Mini? Probably not. At least not for everyone. Some games might play well, but others will be noticeably bad. Puzzle games specifically, like Tetris or Puyo Puyo, which I would consider unplayable in this state. The only folks I could recommend that should pick up the Sega Genesis Mini are people who might not care that much about the games running well, or simply want a tiny collectible system. But in my humble opinion, I hold off for a fix, if one ever comes up.
On Tuesday, directly after I uploaded the video about John Bolton being ousted from the Trump administration, calling on the Trump administration to hire Douglas McGregor at recordings, and one of the video that was posted.
Hello, mate. What's going on?
Everybody, how do I put this? Type moments. In Ari Lana, all the way up to Code Veronica, I felt like there was something really big happening. Can I ask you for a favor? Can I just ask you for a solid plan? Just for a little while, can you just stop doing stupid stuff? See, Dad's trying to get some work done and trying to finish the brand new website, Free Domain, and also tonight, of course,
Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. I am dropping episode 6 in my ongoing series on California. So I hope you'll join me for that on YouTube. So latest stupid stuff, which I think bears a tiny response, is former Blink-eyed Canadian Prime Minister Kim Campbell played with you. Excellent and wonderful.